We all love our Wisconsin, but let's think of it as something else, like what it used to be. Also, how were Germans a part of us, we the people? Change is everywhere. Here, there, and even there. One thing that changed in Wisconsin was during World War I. German was no longer taught in schools, xenophobia ruled the people, and heavily impacted our nation. Xenophobia is a fear of foreigners.
And I'm sitting alone in the trenches that I've learned to call home. And I'm lying on some supposed to be asleep, drenching fear to the bone.
However, Germany could not keep their promise because they couldn't provide the necessary gold. Therefore, Carranza came back to his senses and ended this planning of attacking the United States. Therefore, Carranza came back to his senses and did not proceed with the alliance, because he thought having war with the United States was senseless and unnecessary.
From the street, the noises of blood would drive you insane. And
But the United States got involved from our ship being sunk by the Germans. The ship was called the Lusitania, killing 124 Americans. During the war, Americans felt personally involved.
shells going off, killing others I know.
The world may never know.
Wisconsin voted against entering the war because we had 700,000 immigrants and many socialists in our state. We were called the traitor state, dun dun dun, which led to anti-war treatment, persuasion, intimidation, and harassment. 18 months later, we swung 180 degrees to pro-war. Senator from Wisconsin, Robert La Follette, opposed entering World War I and was considered to be pro-German. La Follette thought we should stay neutral since the war was none of our business. Socialists were against the war because the lower classes would be fighting the rich man's war. What were some of the arguments to entering the war? 1. To help our allies, even though it had been going on for 2.5 years. 2. President Wilson argued it'd be the last war, since he created the League of Nations for more peace. And disastrous of all wars, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. Wilson did not exaggerate. War to end all wars, said by George Kennan. President Wilson argued that World War I would be the last war, since he proposed the League of Nations. The image shown says, "No one is safe under the Espionage Act of 1917, said by the Future Freedom Foundation." Now, what were the Espionage and Sedition Acts? What'd they do? Well, the Espionage Act said, any person who was caught supporting or aiding our enemies was charged with a $10,000 fine and 20 years in jail. The image shown now says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America," and silence about the war. This is referencing the Sedition Act, which says loyal to the U.S. government. Also, you cannot interfere with the draft of any military personnel. The Espionage and Sedition Acts were signed by President Wilson. A constitutional connection to this could be the First Amendment gives you the right to freedom of speech, but it is overridden by these acts. This was the time where the German culture became suspects and criminals. Although Germans were proud of their heritage and found it hard to deny, hospitality towards Germans was high. The American Defense Society declared German Americans, unless known by years of association to be loyal, should be treated as a potential spy. The newspaper states that they rounded up disloyal Germans, especially in Iowa.
And I was sitting alone in the trenches that I learned to call home.
Oh, I remember those Germans, but we didn't call them that. Everyone called them Huns.
Who were the Huns? Well, Germans were named after the Huns, who invaded Europe in 376 AD. These guys were very violent. Once led into war, our people will forget that there was such a thing as tolerance. Ruthless brutality will enter into the very fiber of our national life, infecting Congress, the courts, the policeman, the man in the street. Said by President Woodrow, 1,800 Wisconsin residents died in the war. Some German Americans enlisted. There were 92 million people in the United States, 1/3 of them being immigrants, 1/4 of them being German American. The German language has impacted our culture in many ways. For example, the German language was spoken in many homes in Wisconsin, to the point it was even taught in schools. There are many German words similar in English, like telephone, computer, Brat, and radio, which in German is pronounced Telefon, Computer, and Radio. What should we learn about this episode in history? Well, World War I damaged not only the United States, but the world as a whole, or at least those that entered in the war, which could have been prevented, just like the United States could have not entered in the war. Furthermore, the effects in Wisconsin were very dark, and many Germans were not treated right, by getting lynched and having their culture shamed. Now, what were the dangers of xenophobia in the war propaganda? Well, xenophobia is so dangerous for having an unnecessary fear of their people, which has led to lynching, like to the Germans. Also, the war propaganda influenced people to fear these countries, which overall created a big impact. As the 1920s came around, there came a rise of immigration restrictions. Many Americans did not trust immigrants, which led them to join the KKK, even if it is an anti-African American Klan.